Welcome to The Art of Growth, where we use the Enneagram and the best tools we can find to move toward transformation. I'm Jim Zartman, and on today's episode, I'm sitting down with Joel Hubbard and Suzanne York to talk about driven versus drawn. Are we being driven or are we being drawn? Before we get into that, the hub of all of our work is www.theartofgrowth.org. And you can go there for a free Enneagram test, a free instincts test, and we now have a youth Enneagram test. You can also reach out to us there if you would like us to work with your organization. The Enneagram and the Instincts is the fastest growing emotional intelligence tool in the business world right now, and we have loved getting to work with companies around this. And so if you'd like to have us, reach out to us and we can start that conversation. You can also reach out to all three of us on the website and schedule coaching sessions there. There's a section of the website called Individual Coaching, and you can literally hit a button and schedule with any of the three of us. It's super easy, and every time we have one of these sessions, there's moments of breakthrough, and I love that. It is a great honor. But for now, my friends, let's jump into this week's conversation on driven or drawn.
So recently I've had conversations with some of our clients, and what keeps coming up over and over again with all of them is this desire to work hard on themselves. That's oftentimes why people come to the Art of Growth or come to different groups for personal growth and transformation, and will work on the thing that they find to be, this is the problem that I see in myself, and I really don't want that here. And what I've come to the surprise, this was a surprise to me. I don't think I was looking for this at all. But I found people repressing and editing themselves, and oftentimes we could spiral downward, and the energy was just heavy. We'd be in this, whether it's a group coaching call or individual coaching, and I'd find the heaviness to be like something you couldn't get through and couldn't get past. And I remember talking to this type 3. And he had been holding back on himself because he felt bad about the fact that he is driven towards success, that he wants to succeed in life. And so what he did was to start compressing that, repressing that, editing that down, holding back. I was talking to a type 7 who was very serious. It was like, wow, dude, you are so serious. He was like, I want to be better. I want to work on myself. And it was all of this stuff that was that driving it was really this negative energy. And I think the epiphany hit me like, but you're not living your light. And they were producing some good things, but they just weren't producing from light and from joy and from a place of wanting to really put something good out into the world because they were working so hard on holding back on what they saw was wrong. And so this began to develop for me as, oh, you can't actually get rid of the lower side of your type and not also sabotage the high side. Like there are things, transformational habits that we talk about all the time to work through the lower side, but you just can't go at it with like, I'm going to stop being so driven by success in order to finally stop needing that self-worth as a 3 or as a 7, as in this case. Like I can feel this desire for more all the time in me, so I'm going to hold back and repress that. And what I found were people getting darker and darker, and this was happening with type 1s and type 9s and type 5s and all over the place. And so then I began thinking that maybe you can't really chop off that part of yourself, that there is this sort of light and darkness that are always living together. And if we live from the darkness, sure, we're going to live from the lower compulsion of the type. For example, as I mentioned, the type 3, the compulsion of I can't fail, right? And this is one of the things I began to discover is that most of us are not interested in the high side as much as we are interested in avoiding the low side. For example, I don't want to fail is more of the drive for the 3 than it is I want to succeed. For the 7 is I don't want to feel this emptiness, this hunger, or the negativity. So that's what's driving me, more so than it is that I want to be joyful and I want to create joy in the world. For the type 1, it's more of I don't want to be defective, morally defective. I don't want to be bad. Than it is that I want to do something perfect in this world. And as I began to see that, I started noticing, again, you can't crush it because it's always going to be there, or you're just going to repress and edit yourself so that you're not doing anything in terms of putting your light out into the world. And so I saw all of that, and all of this kind of mess started to create in my mind wow, most of us are driven to avoid the pain of our existential hole. That is this thing of, I don't want to be bad. I don't want to be a failure. I don't want to be overcome by negativity. I don't want to be weak. I don't want to be disrupted or uncomfortable. All these drivers that are pushing us versus being drawn by the high side, which the high side is beautiful. As a type 1, I want to do something wonderful in this world. I want to improve the world. I want to make it a better place. As a type 2, I want this deep connection with other people. I want to feel that unity with others. As a type 3, I want to succeed and actually see that we can do more than we ever imagined we could together. All of these beautiful high sides get crushed by the low side or by the trying to repress the self entirely in order to fit. So I started imagining what would that be like and started trying to write that for each type. What is it, the difference between being driven versus being drawn? But wow, did I see it in me. And it was so constant that that it's more by that. I don't want to be hungry more than, as a 7, more than I want to say, actually experience joy. And what that looks like is I would do things that produce joy. I would do things that produce, happy for all people if I was living from the high side. So it's a fascinating discovery for me to see that those two are sort of the two wolves, as the Native American proverb goes, the two wolves that live within us. And the Native American chief says, which one is going to survive? It's not, you got to kill one. It's just one they're always going to be there. There's one that you're going to have to feed more so than the other.
So many brilliant things in this that I'm trying to figure out which to unpack first. I see it. I see what you're saying, the driven to avoid the low side. And what came up for me was right now in the parenting realm, there's a real shift in language with our kids, which I'm grateful for, and it's hard. But this idea of growing up, I took in, or I felt like I mostly heard comments about my low side.
I bet.
I don't know that I remember hearing comments about my high side. And so that's, and again, this is looking back a lot of years through different lenses, but now I see in the positive parenting approach that we are looking to really reinforce a child's gifts. And so here's hoping we've changed the trajectory in some way. But when I think about being driven to avoid versus drawn to achieve, I think I had a lot more clarity around what my low side was before I had clarity around my high side.
Yes.
And so that, to me, I can see how that has shown up in my life for sure. And this idea of being drawn by my high side sort of feels like a luxury.
Say more about that. What is that?
Luxury.
I don't know. I don't know whether it's that there are these limiting beliefs that I've had around life is supposed to be hard. And if I'm not working at it, then it's not worth it. And again, is that my type? Is that my instinct? Is that my upbringing? All of it? Who knows? And to be drawn by my high side feels like it would be easy. And I want that. But then do I deserve that? Is that okay? Does that match what society tells me should be happening?
Right.
Yeah. I love how you say that because it does feel like we think it would be, well, that feels like a luxury. That would feel easy. But yet it is so hard to actually do that because we have all this internal resistance to it.
And why? I mean, why would we resist the good?
If you can answer that question.
I know, right?
That is the question.
I don't know. I don't know why I do that.
That's going to haunt me. Why do we resist the good? I know there's cultural overlays of the Protestant work ethic in the West, and you have to pull yourself the bootstraps, and it's an uphill battle, and we brag about how little sleep we get and how hard we worked and how we went through all this challenge, and there's a narrative that has sort of this romantic notion to it about like the hardness of it. But when people are really honest about their stories, they're saying, there was a lot of luck. Like it seemed like things were just in flow. Flow language is the opposite of like the driven language.
Yeah, the friction
and the driven part is, it's hard because in this contrast, being drawn is definitely a higher, more evolved thing. But I love like the idea of being driven. There's part of it in me that just says, yeah, be driven and just go for it and push and But it's, again, there's a part of me that knows it's not really my highest self. I know that when I've pushed and fought for things and I've driven towards things and I've tried to bust down the door and I won't take no for an answer, it's not the best things.
Yeah.
Drawn is like this, it's the language of the lover.
Yeah.
Drawn is this invitational welcome to beauty. It's you're going to struggle a little bit to get up the mountain, but it's all to welcome you to the view, to welcome you to this beauty and the awe and the wonder. That's what I feel like being drawn is. And if I'm honest, the best things that have ever happened in my life have been a drawing, not a drive. Mm-hmm. But I have this attachment. That's what it is. Yeah. I have an attachment to drivenness. And I think when you first used that phrase, Joel, like driven versus drawn, I was both really drawn to the phrase and I have this resistance to it. Your stories, Suzanne, the stories about what should be hard and what it should be. But I know that the driven comes with those self-limiting beliefs. It comes with the story of it's all up to me. It comes with the story of like I just have to push. It comes with the story of it'll always be hard and I have to. It'll be like this forever. And drawn is welcome to your life. Welcome to the good you bring to the world. Welcome to the highness. And
right. Well, and there's a sense of alignment for me in that drawn comment. So I can drive anything. I can drive through a wall. I can drive fast. Absolutely. But am I driving in the right direction? Versus drawn, I don't see myself going any slower or more with less achievement. I just see it being in the right direction.
Oh, that's very interesting. And I like how I'm hearing the types in both of what you're saying.
Well, yeah,
totally.
Can't help it.
But that's the way it is embodied. I mean, it has to be embodied that way. Whatever we're drawn to will be the best of our type, I think. I don't think it's exiting the type. I think it's the best of the type when it's well balanced with all three centers, and that there's something three-dimensional about it. There's something more beautiful about it. But yeah, I think that I like how you said that, Suzanne. The thing I think about it is it's exploration. Like, I'm not sure if someone says, well, do you know what that's going to look like? If I know what driven will look like because I've been driven by my type all my life.
Yeah.
So I know what it's going to do. I know the escapes I go to. I know all the stuff that I do with my 7. But I don't know what it looks like when my 7's at its best. That's new. And it's ever evolving. And so the drawn has this appeal to it because all of us, I think, are made for adventure in some sense. Not a type fixed kind of adventure like, type 7s or whatever. It's different for each, but we're all made for it. And I think we're made to be invited into this journey that's not been, it's like you're charting that course. You're creating a path.
Yeah.
And it's got to be embodied in you, which it's never been embodied in anybody else. Like another type 3, like you, Suzanne, is going to have a completely different trajectory. There'll be similarities in the balance of all three centers and how it looks to some sense, but how it's embodied is going to be so different.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of also why it's a little intimidating is I've got to live out something I've never lived out before.
And neither has anyone else.
Neither has anyone else.
And it's how do you
Because
know
no
if
one's
it's
ever
working?
been you. No
one's
ever
ever
had to
been.
figure out how to be you.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. As we're talking about it, this being drawn, it sounds so wonderful. It just sounds like so much better. It sounds like exactly what I want to be and what I want to do. Like, but in the day-to-day life, functionally,
That's the key. Yeah. No way.
There's so much resistance to this. Why? Why, when we're talking about it, I'm like, this sounds so beautiful. It sounds so right. But then, like, in the day-to-day life, in the way I actually show up and function in my life from the time I wake up in the morning, it isn't that, like, so much of the time.
Yeah.
And what is that? Why is there this resistance to actually a life of drawn versus, yeah.
Is there something around spiral dynamics? Like, are we at a place in a society where we have built up expectations of what it means to live a successful life, that then our day-to-day is built around somebody else's definition of it, not our own?
Yeah, I mean, whether spiral dynamics or something else, but there's just so much of the story we were handed, for sure. But I think it's more than that, because if it was just the story we were handed, I think we'd see a lot more people breaking out, because people are always breaking out from what the previous generation said, what other people are saying. Like, there's this desire to, like, go against it. But this is something I feel like internal too. So maybe it's both.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of breaking out right now societally. Yeah. Meaning, like, we are questioning everything, which is great, whether it be because of, the society, social justice, whether it be because of Simone Biles at the Olympics saying this isn't working. Yeah. Like, we get to question everything right now, and that's likely a different avenue than we were going down.
Yeah, no, I think you're intuiting something for sure. I agree. I feel something myself, like something's shifting. So can I just do something a little bit on fight to flow?
Okay.
Because I think that this starts to get at what that question that Jim just brought back and reminded us of is, why is it so difficult? What makes it hard is, I think that there's a need to fight. So the driven part of us has something it's resisting. Right? There's something from our core type, from that existential hole. So all of us have this existential hole, which is this inarticulable. Is that a word?
We'll make it one.
Is you can't articulate what it is. Something in here that feels very real to us. And then we create articulation around it as we develop, as we grow.
Is it articulation or is it an interpretation?
Well, yeah, it's both. I would imagine it's like we're articulating, we're making an interpretation for sure. And then that interpretation then takes us into behaviors. We start to behave according to that, whatever that belief that we created as a result of this existential hole we have. That my theory is we're born with this sort of thing that's happening, that's internal to us, and then our experience of life, not the reality of it, because the reality is really subjective.
Sure.
Like, my experience might be different than my siblings' experience, and it certainly was. We had the same events take place, but we experienced it differently. So my interpretation of it is different, and then my behaviors were different as a result of that. Yeah. And I think that creates this sort of resistance that I have, that all of us have based on our types. And I don't think we can get away from resistance. I think resistance is necessary. We have to fight, but we also have to get to a place where we finally surrender and then move into flow. And I don't think we can skip any of that. And this is difficult because we like destination. We like arrivals. We like to say, here's what I'd like to look like. Here's where I'd like to be. I'd like to be at the high side. I'd like to be at that place of being drawn. I'd like to be and that's wonderful. And yes to all that. But the process of getting there is very much a process of, I have to go through this path. And this path right now has me wrestling and fighting. And I have to, in some sense, lose at some point and then win, which is the paradox of spirituality, is that in the losing you win. And finally, when you realize, oh, this fight, suddenly you have this awareness about the fight, and that awareness brings you into a new stage of being. But that's what moves us into more of that flow, I think. And that goes to explaining in part, doesn't explain it at all in some sense, but it helps us to get at why is it that we're so driven versus drawn. It's because that core existential whole plus the interpretation feels so real to me. I can speak for me. I just know when I'm facing it functionally, as you were saying, Jim, when it shows up functionally, and it's the choice between, am I going to do this or am I going to do that? The type most of the time wins. That lower side of the type most of the time wins.
I don't even feel like I'm aware of it. I don't even feel like I come up to that crossroads and I'm choosing. It's just, it does feel so automatic.
I would agree. Most of the time it is automatic.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you have felt that there are times where it's like when I am aware, I still feel that strong pull. And I'll have these conversations with clients and I'll say, could you do this? Could you imagine? And it's like, I can imagine doing that, but wow, is that really difficult? Because everything about me tells me, imagine, as a 3, like I'm going to choose to like you came here unprepared, right? That's effort for you in some sense to come here unprepared, right?
Yeah.
Because we had all these topics we were going to talk about, but I was like,
and then you sprung a new one on me.
I know.
No, it's true though. I'm living in a very liminal period right now when it comes to navigating the life I want to be living versus the one I was, a much more intentional life. And I have been choosing to live more day to day, especially this summer. And it's been amazing until I hit upon one of those moments when I wish I had planned. And then I'm like, well, I didn't, so I let it go and I figure it out. And this is one of those moments where normally I would come much more prepared. Yeah. But I didn't. And so I was picturing where in my body I feel that resistance versus the flow. Mm-hmm. And it is very different. And so I'm learning my own sensations to know what is resistance because it's data and it's my instinct trying to keep me safe versus a feeling of allowance, like, go ahead, let this flow. And I feel it in different physical spots in my body. And it's amazing for me to be able to tell, is this resistance or is it just a little bit of fear of the good?
Oh, okay.
It's as you're saying that. As you're saying that, I just got this little internal check. Like when you just said that, it revealed something in me. Because I'm sitting here being like, this is a really fascinating conversation for me, but like, where are we going to land for people who are listening, who are like, are they going to be able to keep up with this? Is this going to be, and I'm like, how do I put this all together and make sense of this for everyone?
Because you do that so well.
Because I do that really well sometimes, but right now I'm feeling all this existential, like this block of like, oh no, how do I do that? And I can feel that drivenness to like have this resolution and conclude and be able to package like everyone, I don't want you to feel uncomfortable, so I want to resolve these things that we're talking about for you, and I can't do it. And so I'm feeling all this internal like disruption, as we're sitting here talking about this, like, oh no, am I not smart enough to handle this, like to resolve this issue or to deal with this?
It's so funny because this is the classic difference between order and chaos. So I'm in the chaos camp right now.
I know. I'm like, where's the order? I want the order.
I'm creating chaos right now. Yeah.
No, it's good because, this is just like, as you're saying, I'm starting to notice the resistance. Before, I just believed the resistance. But now, as we've been like, I've just been catching this scent of maybe there's breakthrough here. Yeah. Maybe, do I actually need to do this? Maybe I could wake up in the morning and respond to this differently. And that little bit of a question has a lot of hope in it, but it also has this, what is this going to cost? How am I going to feel different? I don't know. All of this feels very nebulous, unsettling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I would encourage all of us, like those of us who are listening too, is like, and I do this I'm encouraging myself too, like the very act of just asking that question, am I driven versus drawn, is enough. If none of the rest of this made any sense or we are able to resolve it or make, concrete applications to what we're talking about today, the very act of asking ourselves that question starts to open things up. You ask the right questions, you get the better answers. They're coming towards you, And I think it's that question of what areas of my life Am I driven versus drawn? And then with my eyes open, I can see myself resisting over here. I can see myself acting out of the worst side of who I am at times, but doing it with eyes open and with grace and compassion towards ourselves. Because I think as we do that, then it's fascinating how just you start to grow. You just start to grow by the attention. In fact, I'd like to be drawn more than driven. But I think it's this, like last night for me, I think after a difficult conversation I had, I totally shut down. And I watched myself shut down. It was a very painful, very difficult, one of the hard conversations I have to have in life. And I was having one last night. And I could see, I just went completely, I just shut down. And, you know, my wife says, trying to bring me out of it, like, hey, can we watch something together? And I was like, okay. And I went upstairs and we watched stuff together. But it took me probably 3, 4, 5 hours to kind of, you know, fight through that and still not really pull out of it. And then I woke up with some shame around it. Like I went to my escape and I couldn't defeat it. I couldn't beat it last night. And that is a hard reality, I think, for a lot of us, is to recognize the journey is not a precipitous climb upward where you just always just getting better and better and better. And sometimes you're stuck in the resistance. You're stuck in the fight. You're stuck in that driven part of your type. And it is hard to exit that, to go back to being drawn. And so as I was listening to stuff this morning on podcasts and some music, I could feel it in me going, do you see where you are so much more drawn or so much more driven in this area? And that rather than drawn to something beautiful, something that could be even greater than what you're living. It's like, oh yeah, I'm more familiar with failure. I'm more familiar with struggle. I'm more familiar with going back to that which doesn't, I don't know why it is that I'm drawn, but you guys could probably speak to it from your own vantage point, but like, why is it that we're drawn to that which, even if it doesn't work, we keep going back to doing the same things over and over again? They don't even really provide, like even my escapes, they don't really provide the thing I'm seeking. But it just neutralizes, I think, the pain of the existential hole just a little bit. I prefer that. I can see it. I go there rather than going to, yeah, but if you did this, even though you'd feel pain initially, the result is you feel better. And that's one in which only engagement, I guess, engaging in the process will eventually bring you to doing that more often. But
well, and I don't think success is to never have those moments, to never go into those spaces. I would imagine that you moved through it faster. 4 to 5 hours is actually not that long. I bet you moved through it faster than you have in your past.
What is it, like 4 or 5 months?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
it used to be, yeah.
Like,
yeah, it's true.
No, it's very true.
That's a good point.
And so this isn't about not having it. It's about moving through it more quickly and getting to a space where you can come from your high side faster. But for any of us to think that we're going to completely avoid those times, I think that's a fool's errand.
Yeah.
And instead, I'd love to have us recognize the growth we've had in handling those situations faster, better.
Yeah.
But not eliminating them altogether.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And also, I like that in that example, there is sometimes the driven place is driven to shut down, but then wanting to kind of come out of it quicker. And Suzanne, what you said about like celebrating kind of the growth that you've had, like that is so important. We talk about this in one of my groups. We do a thing called Celebrate to Solidify. Like when you actually celebrate moving through something, you celebrate how far you've come. It actually solidifies, it anchors it within you to celebrate it. And so when you take a moment to say like, I moved through that quicker. I stepped into being drawn. I did it 1 time out of 10 right. We mentioned in another podcast. Then we can go, okay, that's good. That's a step. That's good. We'll take it. And then it anchors that growth a little bit more.
Well, you have given us a new call to action when it comes to reflecting. That sounds like an oxymoron. But reflecting on on which is it that which side of the coin have we flipped? Is it are we driven or drawn? And so I know that'll come up for me a lot.
Well, can I ask the two of you a question? What does it look like to you? Maybe and you speak it obviously from your type. So you as a 3, Jim as an 8, and I'll share as a 7. So we'll hit all 3 centers here. What does it look like to you? Have you had moments where you can say, that one felt drawn to me? I moved in a way that was drawn. Other times where you feel like, oh, that's definitely driven. Like I moved from the driven. And thanks for that clarity, Jim, on drivenness. Drivenness doesn't mean like, when I use that term, I'm not thinking about the person who's a hard charger. I'm thinking about how the type drives you, in various ways. So you can have a type 9, for example, who is driven to avoid
for sure.
disruption or conflict, that kind of thing. So, but anyways, yeah.
Yeah, for me, whether it's from the center or one of the instincts, I'm driven when it's about someone else to fulfill the worthiness part of it. That I'm trying to drive to get someone else's reassurance or whatever, or fill a need for someone else, versus I'm drawn when I'm filling a need from myself that isn't selfish, but I'm answering the question of my worthiness myself. And then whatever I pursue after that really is wholehearted. And it's no longer in pursuit of someone else's praise.
Have you had moments of like, excitement about, I could really do something successful here, and it was coming from a good place, like a richness of not driven from like the need for self-worth?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's in that space of, if you didn't need to worry about money, what would you do? And I can completely picture what that would be. And then the day-to-day, like Jim was saying, it feels like I can't do that, which goes back to if I'm really drawn, is that a luxury? Because will it meet all of the other needs that exist in my life?
Yeah.
Not just my existential need.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've definitely feeling drawn, and I think the drawn capacity has come through the things you might naturally expect for someone who's a social type. So I'm drawn in community. I'm drawn to bring relationships together. There's a lot of flow. It's a natural creation for me. It doesn't take a lot of try. It doesn't take a lot of effort. So much of my try piece, and where it feels forced, it feels driven, either to avoid or just freaking get this over with, is in a lot of my self-pres areas. So I definitely can feel the resistance most in those areas. I feel drawn when I'm, doing the high side of the body types, right? So drawn towards, right action and making other people better. And there's a natural flow in that space. But I am so driven when anything is off, when it feels like someone's trying to control me, when I'm, the things that you would expect in my type. It's not just driven, it's aggressively driven. And it feels awful now. The weird thing is it used to feel really good. It felt really good to go to that place and just be like, buck up all the fight in me. But now it's starting to feel like, I just don't have that in me in the same way that I used to. I don't have a better way to describe that right now.
So I want to give maybe an example, and feel free to not have this on the podcast, but you described a ride with your daughter, a bike ride, and she was starting to complain about being tired. And, the driven part of you could have handled that very differently. And the drawn part of you is not you not being an 8. It was you being an 8, but you being an 8 in touch with other centers, perhaps. And it was like, you can do this.
Yeah, because the temptation is when someone is like, I can't, or they start whining, or I start to fear their weakness, is what it feels like.
Yeah.
When I start to feel them caving to their weakness, something goes off in me and says, you will do this no matter what. And if you don't, we'll try it again, and we'll be out here all day. I don't care. But in that moment, instead of saying, you will do this and I'm going to force you to do this, blah, 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 blah. And I've totally gone to that place before. What I told her was like, I won't let you forget how strong you are. I won't let you forget yourself in this space. And then something like came alive in her and she started pedaling again. And then like a few minutes later, it was like nothing happened. She's having a great time. And she's like, I remembered, is what she said. And that happened again, like a few weeks later, going out into the water where it was really, really cold. So I was like, okay, you don't have to get in if you want. And I just go out. And then all of a sudden, like a few minutes later, she's splashing towards me and she just gets this look on her face. She goes, I remember who I am.
No, that's awesome.
And that is just like, okay, you're drawn. Yes, there was this overcoming nature to it, but it wasn't overcoming through force. It was overcoming through love.
That's beautiful, because that's what I see in the types when they're at their best, is there's a beauty to it. It's not this sort of single-dimensional approach. And I feel like all of us, when we're driven, we're in single dimension. And yet there's this thing that you can't quite get your hands around because it's beautiful. It's like art. Wow. That was amazing. How did you... And then yet it has the essence of the 8, or it has the essence of the 3. But it doesn't have that single-dimensional kind of wooden, rigid,
driven,
rough.
The way you're describing it, driven narrows options, drawn widens options.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a magnetic
good.
element to drawn.
Yeah.
And more things get, magnetized to you versus limiting.
Yeah.
Well, that's a way forward. I can't wait to explore this internally. I'm not sure how this will connect with people. Like, part of me just
Or
has
even
the
if
risk
it will.
If it will. I'm
not sure either.
How many people, what percentage of people made it to the end of this podcast? That would be the question.
Oh, geez.
A lower percentage than some. But, I mean, welcome to our mess. Sometimes, sometimes we're like, here's something we've learned and you can take it with you and use it for yourself. That's what we do that a lot in coaching, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
I love doing that. But sometimes it's like, welcome
this is new.
as we're trying to figure
Oh,
this
yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Well, and I know that this is resonating, and I want to hear the stories of how it resonated.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
There's no doubt in my mind.
I'm going to need your help, everybody's help out there, because like I'm only intimating. That's what I feel like. It's like a glimpse. I always describe it as like I see things when I'm not clear on things. It's like in the peripheral. You ever have that?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Where things
yeah.
are in the peripheral, and then you go to look at it. This happens to me at night. This is weird. None of you, I'm sure, have had this experience. But if I'm looking in a room at something that if the lights are off and I'm looking directly at it, I can't see it. But if I turn my eyes slightly, I can see it more from the peripheral.
Nah, man, it's just you.
Yeah,
Okay, so
dude.
it's just me.
And
All
we
right.
thought they
So
weren't
it's a
going to make
trick
it to the
I've
end of
learned.
the podcast before.
This
I'm
is
into-
weird.
Well, I never.
What the hell is happening right
is
now?
This is so weird. This is the worst
And
analogy
that
ever.
I know, it's just so good.
We will never use it. I promise I will never use it
are
again.
dropping right now, yes.
Yeah. All right. So what are they smoking as they're doing this? But yeah, the glimpsing is all I have at this moment. I don't have anything more than that.
Well,
Which is why I figured, well, let's talk about something that we don't know anything about and see what happens.
okay, and that's not that different than other podcasts.
No, that's true.
We do that occasionally. Yeah,
It
yeah.
happens.
But no, but this is the thing. We lean into the curiosity. I think that's we're trying to find the right questions. My goal is never to just hand people the right answers. I don't feel like it does as good of long-term service as finding the right questions. Because if we get to find the right questions, then this community will be learning from it for a long time. And so that's what I want. May we continue to find the right questions, because that will actually create more of the being drawn feeling.
So thanks for listening, and we're curious if you've noticed this energy within you, if you've noticed the difference between being driven at times or drawn. And if you'd love to share about it, then we would love to hear about it. You can reach out to us at www.theartofgrowth.org. Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast so you don't miss anything, and you can follow us on Instagram at Art of Growth. But for this week, my friends, may you become more acutely in tune with the energies within you when you are being pushed, driven, when the energy, the quality of it is force, versus when you are invited, when you are drawn in, when you feel the beckon of wonder and can move toward it freely without anxiety or anger or sadness in the heart, but that essence of being drawn by what is possible and beautiful. Grace and growth, my friends.